Hello everyone. This video is going to be all about the different books that I've read in the past couple of years or so that have really improved both my productivity and my performance, both in terms of my work and also my personal hobbies as well. And so there's around 15 or so of these books that I have that I'm going to run through really quick. I'm also going to cover both how I remember the stuff that's in these books, because that's kind of a problem for a lot of us. The way I used to read in the past, I would read a book, I'd enjoy it at the time, but I very quickly forget about the contents that were in it. So I kind of developed a mechanism or a series of mechanisms that can help me remember what's in these books, which comes in handy right now as I run through them. Also, how I read more. So I read about one book a week, and they're not like small books either. They're like pretty substantial, several hundred pages long. So just some tips that I can share with you that I think will improve your reading capability and also your retention. And then I'll also give a couple more tips near the end of the video. And one thing just to start off, I'm going to put links to all of these different books in the comment section. It's going to be an affiliate link. You don't have to use it, but it does help out the channel. It helps out me as well. So let's get started. The first book that I want to talk about is probably one of the most influential, and I actually made an entire video about this book, I want to say around 6 months or so, and it's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And this book, well, the reason that I bought this book, there's actually a little bit of a backstory with this. The reason is because I was finding that with COVID in the past couple of years, like my ability to focus was really starting to wane. I remember being able to focus for many, many hours at a time, like 4 or 5 hours or 3 or 4 hours at a work, on a work problem, and being able to just like grind through it and be avoiding all distractions that are happening both in the world around me and that are going on in my head. And then I realized, like, after COVID happened, maybe it's because we were staying at home so long or whatever it was, that I kind of lost that ability. I would get distracted by my phone, get distracted by messages or emails, all these different types of things. And so I don't know how this quite happened, but I stumbled upon this book that really talks about this problem more in detail and kind of how this issue of losing our ability to focus is really becoming systemic with all these different apps and gadgets and things that are built to basically grab our attention and hold on to it by these like multi-billion-dollar transnational companies that are basically designed to harvest our time and harvest our data. So this book talks all about how to work a little bit more deeply, more focused, so that you can actually produce a lot more good content and also avoid distractions. So this is Deep Work by Cal Newport. You're going to notice a lot of Cal Newport books in this video because I'm a big fan of this guy as an author. He's also a computer scientist as well. Teaches at Georgetown University in the US. And kind of, I feel like a lot of what he talks about really relates to me as a person, which is why I'm such a big fan. So let's move on now to the second book, and this is actually something that Cal Newport talks about in Deep Work, which is, it's called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And the reason that this book is important is because, even if you're very good at focusing deeply about things or on particular problems, you need a structure to actually organize the tasks that you want to complete. A lot of people just use like a simple to-do list, and he kind of argues in this book that that's not good enough. You need to have a lot better structure. So there's a bunch of mechanisms that David Allen goes through in this, and it's kind of it's a little bit prescriptive in terms of how he suggests it. He uses like kind of a paper filing system, and you organize based on context and how to break down problems. Like the common 3-step process he talks about in this book is capture, configure, control. So you capture your ideas, like you just write them down. You have a system for producing like an intake of all the ideas that come in, and then you configure. So you organize them, you put them into different priority and different sequences, and then you control them, or you assign different times, or you use a time blocking system so that you can actually get those things done in a reasonable and organized way. So excellent book for getting control over your life. I actually came up with a variation of his system that he suggests here that is a little bit more digital. If you're interested in learning about that, on how I organize all my tasks and make sure that I never drop things and I'm just reliable as heck. Let me know in the comments if you want to kind of hear more about my system. I use a couple different apps and it works really, really well. So again, this is Getting Things Done by David Allen. Excellent, excellent book that really changed my outlook on how to stay organized and how to ensure I don't let things drop. Okay, this next one, a little bit of an older book, older in the context that I read it a while ago, called Grit by Angela Duckworth. This is a very commonly on a top reading list for a lot of popular celebrities and stuff. But essentially, Duckworth argues the idea that a lot about what makes us successful in life is our ability to have grit. So even if something is challenging or there's a particular problem that we're trying to solve, the most successful people have the ability to keep with it or stay focused on the task at hand, even when they're not seemingly making any meaningful progress. So it's been a little while since I read this book, and it's kind of an easy read. You can read this kind of thing before bed. But yeah, this is kind of an interesting one, Grit by Angela Duckworth, very commonly referenced as well. Okay, this next one here called Ultralearning by Scott Young. This is kind of one of my favorites in the past, I want to say, year or so. And the reason that this book is interesting is because it kind of it goes against the grain in terms of how people usually try to learn subjects. Okay, this book is all about how to get better at learning things and being a little bit more deliberate. So this book starts off with a story of Scott, and you may have heard about him in the news and different articles and referenced at times. But he basically completed the MIT computer science degree in a series of months, as opposed to typically it's a 4 or 5 year curriculum. And so he walks through his process for doing it. And the interesting thing about this book is that it gives you kind of a recipe for how to learn things very intensely over a short period of time. Very applicable to a lot of things in our lives, whether you're preparing for interviews or trying to learn a technical subject or anything like that. So he talks about how to identify the topic, how to break down the major concepts, how to organize the gaps that you may have, and how to actually tackle them. So drilling problems, getting feedback. There's 5 or 6 or 7 or 9 different main ideas that are in this book in terms of how you actually be a little bit more deliberate in how you learn subjects. So Ultralearning by Scott Young, another really, really excellent book for being a little bit more kind of deliberate in how you tackle subjects. Okay, this one, another one by Cal Newport. You're going to hear a lot about Cal Newport in this session because he's very influential in kind of the content that I've read recently and kind of how I look at life. This one's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Now, this one is super fascinating because it definitely, again, goes against the grain in terms of what you're taught from a young age, which is the idea that, when you're young, your parents tell you to just kind of follow your heart, follow your passion, do what you really enjoy doing, and you'll be happy in life, things like this. And this is the complete opposite. This book makes the complete opposite argument in this. Now, he talks about the big reason that a lot of us are so dissatisfied in our lives is because maybe we follow our heart and it doesn't necessarily lead to anything kind of productive, or maybe we fail and it doesn't work out. And a lot of people don't actually even enjoy their jobs, which is kind of sad to hear. I think there's some crazy statistic, 60% of Americans don't enjoy what they do every day. And so this book instead kind of shifts that on its head. And it makes the argument that instead of kind of following your heart, following your whatever you really want to do in your life, instead just focus on getting really, really good at a particular thing. Maybe you have a job that, isn't the greatest, but how do you actually do that as good as you can, as well as you can? And what he argues is that once you become good at something, you actually become passionate about it. And this is actually exactly what happened to me with the content of this YouTube channel, AWS, right? I was, interested in AWS. I wasn't necessarily the most passionate about it in the beginning, but it was really hard. I didn't particularly enjoy it at the time when I was first learning it. But as I learned more and more about it and appreciated it, I became super, super passionate about it, as you can tell in this, YouTube channel. And now I love it. I talk about it all the time. I'm super interested, super fascinated. I always want to get better and learn more about AWS and what's going on in the world. And so this book kind of talks about this kind of early life lesson that we got taught by our parents and people around us, and kind of turns that around. So very interesting book. So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. Another excellent read. This is probably one of my top 5 for the past couple of years as well. The next two are also by Cal Newport, but I'll go through them pretty quick. Digital Minimalism, excellent book as well. Kind of similar to Deep Work, but this one is more about how devices and a lot of computers and digital things basically distract us and take us away from what is important and what we should be doing. So he suggests kind of a mechanism for abstaining from a bunch of these different distractions, getting rid of your phone, using like an old kind of Nokia style phone that just has basic texting and stuff, a bunch of mechanisms that you can apply and deploy in your life that'll basically kind of put you on a dopamine detox that'll make you a little bit more focused and hopefully a little bit more effective and productive person. So that's Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Next one as well, A World Without Email. This one is more aimed at kind of the corporate setting. It talks about how email in general has really affected productivity. Talks about the history of how kind of we used to exchange information before email existed and how useful it was at the time. But now it's become kind of a big problem where like executives, and you probably know this too, like anyone that kind of works at a corporate job, is probably on their email like 40-50% of their day, which is ridiculous. So he talks about how to kind of avoid this and different mechanisms that you can apply to reduce the amount of time that you spend on your email. And also good for like executives or people that are more senior to realize that this is actually a big problem that affects our productivity and something that we really need to tackle. So this is A World Without Email by Cal Newport. Okay. Last three in this category. This one is called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. This one is all about setting goals and being accountable for your goals and latching on to other people's goals that maybe are more senior than you. So it's all about like breaking down problems into a measurable goal, a measurable and realistic goal. They use this concept of OKRs, which is objectives and key results, which are it's a very popular concept. But how do you break down a task or something that you want to do into something that's achievable both in the short term and the long term? And then how do you actually measure it so that you know whether or not you've actually succeeded at it or not? So this is Measure What Matters, very popular among, can you see that? Yeah. Very popular among kind of senior leaders. This is like on the desk of my director at work. So definitely a book that gets a lot of attention by senior folks. Okay, this next one. This one is like absolutely unbelievable. It's called, I don't know if you can see this one. Yeah, Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. This one is so good. It talks about how to literally think in systems. Now, a lot of us, when we're thinking about, I don't know, like what kind of systems can you relate to? Like how fossil fuels get generated and how we consume fossil fuels as an economy. And like, there's a harvesting component, there's a storage component, and then there's a consumption component. It teaches you principles about how you think in systems. So there's inflows into a system, there's a stock, so like a repository, how much you keep, then there's outflows of a system, and then there's different kind of connections between these different components. As I was reading this book, actually, it directly related to a problem that I was trying to solve at work related. Well, I can't really talk about it, but super underrated book. Highly suggested. It's a little bit expensive. I think it's like $30 or $40 USD. But excellent book. Really shaped the way I think about large scale problems and how connections exist between systems and how to model them and be able to understand them. Very good read. The really sad thing about this book is that the author, Donella Meadows, passed away. So unfortunately, like you're not really going to get any more content from her. Someone set up a website that has some of her other kind of short form essay work, so you can go and read about those. But excellent book for those of you that want to understand connections between systems and think about them more in terms of a structured way and not just kind of haphazardly trying to identify how things work. So Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. The next book, this one is in terms of management. So I'm getting back into management, and this one it's a classic called High Output Management by Andrew Grove or Andy Grove. Also passed away, which is a really sad story. But Andy Grove he was the CEO at Intel for like 20 years or so, and he really like helped turn around the company. So he breaks down management. It's kind of like management for dummies, and not necessarily dummies, but he teaches you a lot of concepts that he applied at Intel to make it such an effective organization. So things like setting goals for the company, understanding, well, he talks more specifically about like production industries, but a lot of the lessons here apply to whatever industry that you're in, and also like how to deal with people and performance evaluation and how to motivate and inspire your employees. So if you're a manager and you haven't read this book, please buy it. It's very cheap. It's like $15. It's probably going to change the way you look at management, the way you look at motivation for your employees. So please, I wish every manager in the world reads this book, High Output Management by Andrew Grove. Okay. The next four, actually, I just have four left. These are related to writing skills. Now, writing is something that I'm very passionate about. I work in Amazon, so they have this peculiar culture where they are very into writing. You have to write documents, that you have to write design documents, lots of 6-page reports on certain things. And before I get into the books, actually, this book in particular, I'll get into it in a sec. The way I used to write was actually not the best. And I think a lot of people will relate to what I used to do, which is, I'd have a topic, I'd have something that I want to write about. I would just start a new file on Word or Excel or Word. I would start a new file on Word and I would just kind of fumble my way through it. And I would expect that, I'd be able to turn something around. You spend so much time on this and, you don't really have clarity of thought. You don't have any like good ideas that kind of flow together in a way that makes sense. And so after struggling with this for many, many years, I started to kind of try to break down like what is writing? How do people become good writers? A lot of people have excellent writing skills. Sometimes you read a document, you're like, wow, that was amazing. Like I understood everything that was there, but why was it so good? What were the components of it that made it so easy to understand? What did the author do? And the problem is that if you don't know what to look for in how the person is writing, then a lot of it will just fly right over your head. And so when I realized that, I need to improve at this, I started thinking of like, how do I actually improve? What I was really looking for was a methodology to break down the writing process into steps that I can follow again and again. And so that anytime I wanted to write a document, all I had to do was kind of follow this recipe of things that I do in sequence. And so one thing led to another, and I came across this book, which is called The Pyramid Principle by Barbara Minto, who is I don't know if she was an executive, but she was definitely high up at the consulting company McKinsey. And the first half of this book is kind of where it's the meat of it, in my opinion. But it talks about how to break down ideas and explain them in ways that anyone can understand, and how to structure your thoughts so that they flow, so that they're in the right order, so that you present them using the correct logical line of reasoning. So inductive versus deductive thinking. It explains what those are and which ones that you should use. Excellent book. I recommend this to anyone that is trying to get better at writing skills. And also, not necessarily just writing, but even YouTube as well. Like I use this same methodology for YouTube. Just explaining things in a nice, succinct way. This book will help you do that. Highly suggest it. This is literally my number one book for the past several years. You should definitely buy it. Again, it's a little bit expensive because I guess it targets more people that are interested in improving themselves. For whatever reason, productivity books seem to be more expensive. But Barbara Minto, The Pyramid Principle, excellent book. You should buy it if you want to get better at reading, explaining, and also storytelling too. The next couple are also about writing. This one is It's called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. This one's usually recommended for people that want to improve writing as well. It's a very, very easy read. A lot of like little tips on how to like use language correctly and different kind of patterns to avoid. There's nothing really that stands out to like, there's no real massive idea. It's a lot of like little ideas that I think come together. So it talks about like a lot of writing principles as well. So similar to pyramid principle, like you don't really think about these things as you are writing, but there's actually some things going on behind the scenes that you really need to know about. On Writing Well by William Zinsser. Okay, last two books. Similarly, Stephen King, On Writing. Everyone knows Stephen King, right? He's probably one of the most iconic authors in the 20th century or 21st century, whatever. But this book is by Stephen King, and it basically is a biography or autobiography of how he writes and how he breaks down ideas and how he writes the great content that he does. Now, it's more aimed at fiction, but there's also some really good tips in here for nonfiction writers. So one of the key ideas in this book is to cut, or kill your darlings, as he says it, which is to explain things or write things in as few as possible words, to reduce and eliminate as many words as possible, only have as many words on the page that are needed to explain the core idea of what you are trying to explain. So excellent book as well. The last one, very short book. It's only like, as you can see, like 47 pages. This is another classic called The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. It's a very old book, but a classic. It's also kind of a reference. And this book is just contained with tips on the English language, how to be more effective, how to structure things, different patterns to avoid. It's kind of like it's very short and succinct, like bullet point style notes that you should apply in your writing. Everyone should own this book. If you haven't, you should definitely buy it. It's very cheap as well. It's like $5. Excellent book. So these are all the books. I will put links to each of these in the comment section below, and there'll be an affiliate link for Amazon. But now I want to talk about some of those extra items. So how I remember what's in all of these books and how to read more. And so the first thing that I want to call out is that how do I remember what's in here? Now, one thing that I do that I think you may agree or disagree with this is that I buy physical books. I'm a really physical book guy because there's a good reason. The reason is because I love to write in my book. So you can probably see like there's underlining, there's like me restating things. There's like a lot going on in these books. And it's very helpful for me because I can run through these books a little bit later and like very easily pick up like, okay, what's important, what's not. So that's the first tip, like write in your books, your physical books preferably, but if you use digital, like highlight them or have some kind of system where you can take notes so that you can refer to them later and also remember what's in there. Now, the second this is probably the most important thing that I've done to remember what's in books, is that I write book reports on each book that I read. They don't have to be long. They can be like a page long, but they just kind of restate the ideas of what's in the book and also a small little like narrative of what I thought about the book, what I liked, what I disliked. And what that does is that it forces you to go through each, like in combination with the other tip, it forces you to go through all of your notes and like pull out and rewrite what are the main ideas. You will forget things by default if you don't make an effort to remember them. And writing them down in your own words is a key way that you can do this. So creating book reports, like just create a Google Docs and like a folder and just, I have a date and the author and the title of the book, and then I have a template. I just fill it out when I'm done the book. It takes like 20 minutes. Well, depending on the book. If it's a little bit more detailed one, it kind of maybe takes half an hour. But again, this makes it so important. And the reason I can remember so much about these books as I talk to you about them today, well, at least some of them that really stuck with me, is because like I have a system for doing this, right? So take notes in your book, physical if you can, write book reports. And the last tip is if you really, really want to take it to the next level, use a flashcard system. You can either do this manually, like you can write out flashcards and just kind of cycle through them periodically for the key ideas of the books. Now, the method that I suggest is using a digital system. Let me actually pull it up because I forget the name of it now. I think it's called like Anki, which is very popular with like med students. So Anki flashcard. Yeah, it's called Anki. And I have this on my computer, and basically when I'm writing my book report, as I'm writing each key idea, I throw them into this system, and it basically, it's a program that you open, and whenever you answer, like you have to create a flashcard set for whatever you want to test yourself against. And basically whenever you answer a question, you put in like, was this easy, hard, medium, and it'll cycle through those questions depending on the difficulty that you set. So if you say, oh, this was an easy question, it won't ask you again for maybe a couple days or like a couple weeks. If it was a hard question, it'll make you it'll ask you again in that same session. Each session takes around 10 minutes or so where you cycle through the questions. You can also organize them into decks that are for specific topics or different sub-themes. So Anki is a really, really popular method for flashcarding, and it's something that I think more people should use. It really, really helps cement the ideas in your brain. The last thing that I want to talk about is how to read more. This is a very common question that I get. I read a book a week, sometimes like a book and a half a week. But I aim for at least one mechanism that I use is an absolute minimum of 25 pages per day. And, you know, some of you may say like, okay, 25 pages, depending on the book, kind of depends. Like if is it something that's really, really thick where you really have to get into? Is it some books are very, very easy to read. So, you know, what does 25 pages really mean? So this is just a guidance. If it's a more thick book, then maybe you can do a little bit less where if you have to really spend time understanding the ideas. Obviously, if it's a textbook, it's different. But if it's something that's a little bit easier to read and the spacing is kind of very sparse in between each line, then you can increase this up or down. But absolute minimum 25 pages per day. So how do I do this? I go to bed early and I read before bed. Simple as that. I go to bed typically around like 9:30, 10 or so. Then I'll read between 30 minutes to an hour. Try to go to bed before 11 o'clock. So that's just a very simple thing that I do. It's to increase the volume that I read in combination with the other tips that I have that help with retention. I also read on my commute to work for the 3 days a week that I go into the office. So I have like a half an hour commute where I'm on the train. So I read usually both ways, but sometimes only one way. And so I get an extra 30 minutes or around 25 pages there as well. So look for opportunities to fit this into your day instead of like looking at your phone and going through like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, whatever your vice is. Just keep a book with you and just read it. I know it's hard. A lot of people, maybe they don't feel like they can retain focus, but hopefully a lot of these books will help you with retaining focus. And a lot about being able to read for these longer periods is about practice. Like sometimes I can read for like 2-3 hours if I really want to, and I have nothing to do. And that comes with practice. You start with only like 20 minutes of uninterrupted time. There's some interesting tips in this book. I think it's actually in Deep Work or maybe Ultralearning, where either Cal or Scott Young talk about starting small. So 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus. If you screw up and your mind wanders, you reset that timer. But you can start even in shorter duration. So 10 minutes, 15 minutes, go up to 20, 30. Increase the frequency and the intensity over time, or the duration and intensity over time. And this will train your mind to be able to be more focused at things that you set your mind out to. This applies for reading. It applies for concentration and focus in other areas. But being able to just sit down and digest a bunch of content and be kind of really into it is very important. So yeah, these are kind of my top 15 or so books that I've really enjoyed and have had a really big impact on my productivity and my performance in my career. Again, I'll leave the links to them in the description section below. Let me know what you think about these books. Maybe you've read a couple, maybe you haven't heard of any, but if there's anything that stands out, I'm eager to hear what you folks think. But thanks so much for watching and sticking with me to the end, and leave a comment below. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.